Yo, Shortbox Nation, this is Botter, and I'm here to tell you right now that con season starts early this year with the return of Northeast Florida's premier anime, comic book, and sci-fi event, Collective Con. That's right, Northeast Florida's largest pop culture convention returns for its 10th year on March 8th through the 10th at the Prime Osborne Center in Jacksonville, Florida. 10 years of Collective Con, they're pulling all the stops out to make sure this is a can't-miss event. And the guest list they got going, don't even get me started on the guest list. I mean, they've got A-list celebrity guests and voice actors from some of your favorite movies, anime, and video games like Elijah Wood and Sean Ashton, Ray Park, Trisha Helfer, Ross Marquand, Max Middleman, and Bo-Katan herself will be there, Katie Sackhoff. Tell me what other convention is giving you the opportunity to meet Frodo and Sam from Lord of the Rings, Darth Maul, and One Punch Man all under the same roof. Only at Collective Con. And if you're looking to get some of your favorite comics signed, or if you want to get an original sketch from some of the best comic artists in the world, well, you're in luck, because there'll be plenty of comic and creator guests there, like DC comic artist extraordinaire Clay Mann, Harvey Award-nominated illustrator John Taylor Christopher, Marvel and DC cover artist Chris Stevens, and acclaimed Star Wars author Timothy Zahn. They'll all be at Collective Con this year. And if you're looking to bring the family, or if you want to make a weekend out of it, you're in luck, because there'll be so much going on at Collective Con that weekend in the form of vendors, fan panels, video game tournaments, cosplay contests, after parties, and a bunch of fan events. You can purchase single and 3-day weekend passes now using the link in this episode's show notes, or by going to collectivecon.com to book your tickets and hotel. Buy your tickets now, and I'll see you at Collective Con, March 8th through the 10th. Now let's start the show.
The Unite the Seven, a nerdy podcasting event, kind of started as an idea when I was going through, again, I watch a lot of YouTube, and I know a lot of creators over there often collaborate with other artists or other creators on the YouTube channel. And they'll often tag team to create like a larger event, so they'll say, if you want to watch, if you want to see every episode in this event, go to this channel, go to this channel, go to this channel, and they'll each offer something different. And I thought, I have never, in all the years that I've been listening to podcasts, I've never seen anyone do that in the podcasting world. And I thought, what is something that could bring together 7 nerdy podcasts? And it was kind of, overwhelming by the fact that every single show almost immediately was like, I'm in. The Unite the 7 nerdy podcasting event is just something that I'm very proud of. But I said this in the promo, I don't want to take any more credit for it really, because all I did was put the idea out to all you talented people, and then we're all doing it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Shortbox Podcast.
The Shortbox Podcast is recorded live from Jacksonville, Florida.
Yo, Shortbox Nation, welcome back. This is episode 337 for all of you new friends and first-time listeners joining us today. Welcome to the show. You're now tuned into the Shortbox Podcast. I'm Botter Milligan, and thanks for joining me. Today, I'm bringing you a great conversation with fellow comic podcaster Chris Hacker. Chris is one half of the Oblivion Bar podcast, a nerd culture show where he and his co-host, Aaron Knowles, discuss and review a wide range of topics, including comic books, television, film, video games, and so much more. The show recently celebrated its 50th episode milestone in August, and in that same month, Chris announced a master plan to unite 7 incredible comic podcasts, Shortbox included, to cover the world's greatest heroes, the Justice League, for a podcast crossover event called Unite the 7. You'll learn about the event and hear from Chris soon, but first I want to thank our sponsor, Gotham City Limit, for bringing you this episode commercial free. Gotham City Limit is Jacksonville's premier shop for comics, toys, collectibles, and more. So if you live in the area or ever find yourself passing through Jacksonville, stop by the shop on Southside Boulevard and tell them the Shortbox sent you. Let's give it up one more time for our sponsor and welcome our guest of honor. Shortbox Nation, it's my privilege to introduce to you Chris Hacker. Hey, Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Thanks so much. Thank you, Botter, for having me here on the Shortbox. Excited to be here. Excited to talk about all things Unite the 7. Like we said this, before the show, and I want to say it here live as well. As a Leo, my zodiac sign is a Leo, and as a fellow podcaster, I love to talk about myself. So if we get to talk about, but of course the Shortbox and the Oblivion Bar for about an hour or so, I'm more than happy to do that. And also, real quick, if I can preface something.
Hit it.
I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, but my voice is nearly gone. I nightlife as a bartender, so I was very busy this weekend, and I just want to let everyone know that when you hear this is not my normal voice. I'm currently trying to recover. So yeah, I'm glad to be here though. Absolutely.
Even at 50% of your normal voice, it's still sexy, baby. I mean, come on. I mean, you're coming through loud and clear.
Ooh.
All right, Chris, I got to ask, what kind of comic podcasters would we be if we didn't start out by addressing the thing that gave many of our fellow comic kinfolk a reason to be hype this Monday morning? What did you think of the Hawkeye trailer?
It was awesome. I love the fact that they're going for this Christmas look. You know, obviously this is premiering later in the year, so they're really leading into that. They've done that a couple times. They did that with, I want to say, Spider-Man. I think it might have been Spider-Man Homecoming, had a little bit of a Christmas feel. You have Iron Man 3, obviously was kind of a Christmas movie. So really excited to see what they do here with this Hawkeye series, because Hawkeye is one of those characters, especially in the MCU, that gets a lot of flack for kind of being the odd man out. With his bow and arrow. And,
that haircut in Endgame didn't help.
You're right. Yeah. The total millennial haircut that he had there in Endgame for no reason was so weird. Like, I understand the Ronin persona, but why did you give him this weird V, like Fox haircut? And also what I'm most excited for, and I think a lot of people are, is Haley Steinfeld kind of inheriting the role as Kate Bishop.
Absolutely.
I think if you look at modern comics today, modern comic book readers, there are like 4 or 5 new heroes that everyone, like the newer readers, are in love with. And I would be probably remiss to say that not Haley Steinfeld, Kate Bishop is one of those characters that people just love.
Oh, big time.
So it's a big step for Marvel to kind of pass the mantle from Jeremy Renner, who is of course one of the original Avengers. And I'm excited to see what they have here with her.
I'm glad you said that about spotlighting Haley Steinfeld, because I think what Marvel's been doing as far as like injecting, new blood into the MCU, we saw that as early as, I'll just go kind of Black Widow with Florence Pugh playing, Black Widow's sister Yelena. Now we get Haley Steinfeld, Shang-Chi just premiered, new blood. I'm really enjoying seeing Marvel kind of, bring in this new crop, fresh like face, a crop of actors and actresses into the MCU. And, if the trailer's anything to go by, I think Haley Steinfeld is going to steal the show.
It looks like a lot of fun. And there have been rumors. I hope that this isn't a spoiler for anyone. And of course, these are just rumors anyway, but there are rumors that Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin may show up at some point in this series to kind of bridge that Netflix to MCU, I guess the old Netflix, continuity to the normal MCU. There also Florence Pugh's Yelena Belova is supposed to show up as well from Black Widow. So a lot of cool things happening here. Hawkeye, again, I think actually, if I'm not mistaken, just based on the logo and of course the source material here with Kate Bishop and the team up with Clint Barton, this is going to be heavily inspired by Matt Fraction and David Yaha's run from back in the day, one of the most celebrated comic runs over at Marvel. So if it's anything close to that run, I think a lot of us have read and loved, we're going to be in for quite the treat.
I don't get enough fellow comic podcasters on the show, but anytime I do, I always have a good time, because it's like everything you're saying, I get. It's like, I'm glad you brought that up. Oh, I'm glad you brought that up, Chris.
The inside baseball.
Exactly. I can only relate to a professional comic writer or artist only so much before I'm like, yeah, you're actually making the comics. I'm talking about it. So, yes, I get the same vibe as far as, the trailer, I mean, literally, for the most part, lifts a lot of the design work from that 2012 Matt Fraction and David Aja run a lot. Like, the circles, the kind of different hues with the purple and whatnot. And I remember when that comic run came out, I believe I was working at the comic shop at that point, and that run just completely, I mean, maybe it's a little too much hyperbole, but I felt like it definitely changed the game. It was definitely a different tone that we had seen in comics, especially Marvel at the time. What Matt Fraction was doing for like the slice of life, there wasn't a lot of like big baddies or crossovers in that Hawkeye run, and I think it only ran for like 24 issues, but it was one of the most. I mean, people were coming in every week to put that comic book on their pull. And I forgot what the phrase we had used in the shop, but we would describe we started noticing other comics, especially in Marvel, try to take some of that approach, that Hawkeye and what Matt Fraction did in Hawkeye, where it's like, slice of life. This is like what their, day to day looks like. And I'm so glad to see that this trailer hopefully will lift a lot of like that comedy and that visual from that run.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the big draw behind that particular run of Hawkeye is because they really centered on getting to know Kate Bishop as the new Hawkeye, kind of learning this new relationship that she has with Clint Barton. And if I'm not mistaken, he's blind in that series as well. And I wonder if they're going to do that with Jeremy Renner's Clint Barton in this series. Is that correct?
Was he blind or was he deaf? Because I know he had a hearing aid.
I think you're right. I think he might have been deaf. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, I knew it was some kind of impairment when it came to his actual abilities. And I hope that they do something with that, maybe kind of, and of course, Pizza Dog as well. We would be terrible not to.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see what they do with this. This was one that, with the Ms. Marvels and the Moon Knights of the world and Secret Empire, things that are coming out through Disney Plus, this was one that I was kind of like, yeah, I'm relatively excited to see what they do, but I'm not like super duper excited. And Marvel has done it again. They have figured it out
how to make any character interesting.
Right. I should just know not to doubt them anymore. I should just automatically excited. It's going to be a really terrible day whenever they eventually put out something that's just kind of mediocre and not that great, because it's going to catch me completely off guard now, because I just automatically assume everything they put out now is usually good to great.
Yeah. And I don't think they've had any dumpster fires.
Right. And humans maybe, if you want to consider that.
Well, you know what? Who actually enjoyed really I think only like Marvel OGs, like really old head Marvel fans from like the early days probably enjoy that. And I say that only because my dad is someone I consider. Oh no, I do consider him the Marvel OG, and he loved it for that reason. He was like, "There's Black Bolt and Medusa." I'm like, no one cares.
Yeah. Dad, this is not good.
It's like, please, not everything Marvel does it good. But Chris, since we're on the topic of comic books and we're kind of going down a memory lane of some of these of comic books, do you remember your first conscious exposure to comics, or maybe like a memory related to the moment that you became a serious fan of the medium? Yo, this is Botter. Sorry for interrupting this episode, but I'll keep it brief. I wanted to let you know about a massive sale we have going on over at the Shortbox store on all of our merchandise and apparel. That's theshortboxstore.bigcartel.com. You can now save 20% off your entire order using the discount code YO, Y-O-O. So if you've been waiting for the right time to finally buy that gauntlet snapback, or if you ever wanted to buy any of the shirts you see me wear on the podcast, well, now's your chance to get them for a steal. We still have a few sizes left of everything, but they won't last long, and once they're gone, they are gone. And then I mentioned that all of our apparel is screen printed on high quality material. None of that heat transfer or direct to garment stuff. Our shirts are some of the most comfortable ones you'll ever wear, and the hats look even better in person. So wear your support for the Shortbox Nation proudly, knowing that you're going to look damn good doing it. Get to theshortboxstore.bigcartel.com as soon as you can, and don't forget to use that discount code YO, Y-O-O, to save 20% off your entire order. All of this information can be found in this episode's show notes if you want to get there faster. Thanks for not pressing fast forward. Now back to the show.
So I've always kind of attributed my love towards comics and the medium itself to the original animated series from the 90s, those WB, Batman the animated series, Spider-Man the animated series, X-Men the animated series, all of these. That definitely had a huge influence on me as a kid. My first exposure of actually reading comics, though, it's a little hazy. But I will tell you, when I started getting into comics the way that I am today. So throughout my life, I always read comics very passively. I very distinctly remember reading Watchmen. Why? At some point at 10 years old, just like sitting under a lamp, trying to read Watchmen. And it's like, what, if I can just quickly veer off for a second, Watchmen is like a total, it holds a mirror up to the medium and is like almost poking fun at it. And Alan Moore is almost like kind of saying, isn't this silly, guys? Isn't comics silly? And I didn't know that as a kid. I just was looking at it and going, oh my gosh, this is so sophisticated. Look how smart I am for reading Watchmen. But yeah, that's probably not a good idea as a 9-year-old. Guys, if you have kids, don't give your kids Watchmen at 10 years old. But on that, my first distinct memory of loving comics the way I do now and being what they call a quote unquote Wednesday warrior, going to my local comic book shop every week on Wednesday to get my pull and to kind of do all that, was the Greg Capullo, Scott Snyder New 52 Batman run. I very distinctly remember grabbing that off the rack for the first time and just being enthralled by that. Really, really, like, and it's not really even that long ago. I want to say that came out maybe in like 2010 or maybe 2011.
Yeah,
so I've only, to be honest, and and again, I love these characters for a very long time, but to the amount that I do now, it's only been maybe 12 years that I've really started to love these characters the way I do. And I always suggest to people, and I think you may as well, that if you ever want to get into the world of comics, you don't have there. It's a very daunting look into the world of comics and the medium.
Yep.
Because there's such a backlog of so many characters, especially the big ones. You never know where to start, what's in continuity, what matters, what doesn't, what's good, what's not, because you don't want to go up and pick something up and then it sucks because comics are not cheap. But I would say if you're ever wanting to get into comics, just go and pick up whatever issue of a character that you like that week. And that hopefully those creators will catch you up in that issue. And I say that all the time. And I very distinctly remember reading those first, I want to say like 4 or 5 issues of the Court of Owls storyline by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, thinking, why have I not been reading these my entire life? Why have I not been coming to my local comic shop? Why have I been wasting my time on Pokemon cards and Game Boys and not reading comics?
Well, hold up now. I mean, Pokemon cards is the new stock. Like I've literally seen that as like stock advice on like MSNBC. So I mean, don't completely discount your old passions.
Right. And I think that was like majority of my childhood was video games and trading cards.
Same.
But comics was always present. It was always there. And again, most of my love comes from those animated series. But when it comes down to it, I always like to attribute that New 52 Batman run. New 52 gets a lot of slack. A lot of people don't like a lot of New 52, rightfully so. I think there's about 7 runs in that entire New 52 event.
The batting average ain't that
worth a damn, if I'm being honest. But there are some real gems, like the Jeff Johns Aquaman run, obviously the Batman run by Greg Capullo and Scott Snyder. The Justice League Dark, that original run is pretty good. Yeah. So, I would say that's kind of my long-winded way of saying the New 52 Court of Owls run.
Scott Snyder's New 52 Batman was the first time I ever put Batman on my pull. Like I was collecting it on a weekly basis, and I had the same kind of epiphany where it was like, why have I not been reading or collecting Batman? He's like the biggest hero, and prior to that, like I just wasn't that interested. But I think what we're both kind of highlighting is that, I remember being very like I was just groaning at the idea of New 52, and then like really relaunching all 52 titles. I remember it being like. And I think I was working at the shop then. And it was like, what? Again, more relaunches? But in an effort to, not only clean up continuity, but also to get new readers. And I mean, I've heard many a times from other comic book fans that the New 52 was a perfect gateway for them. I think, what happens is those events definitely rub longtime collectors and fans the wrong way, because it's like, well, God damn it, we were just in the middle of this story arc. Now we're restarting number 1. I've got to, reread all these rehashes. But I felt like the Batman one, among some of the other ones you mentioned, were some of the strongest ones.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think New 52, for all its woes, gave me personally an entryway into a couple different worlds with, of course, the Batman run with Greg Capullo and Scott Snyder, but also my first ever Swamp Thing run there by Scott Snyder was my first, dive into Swamp Thing, which if people, if you're familiar with the Oblivion Bar with, myself in general, that Swamp Thing is actually my favorite character. So that was my first, dipping my toe into it. And of course, it's not because of the Scott Snyder, it's because of the Alan Moore run. But, I would have never had that interest in that character had it not been for the New 52. The same thing can be said actually about Kyle Higgins's Nightwing run. The only 2 comics on my original pull, when I started a pull at my local comic shop, which at that time was in Indianapolis, where I'm from. I'm from Indiana. It was Downtown Comics. Shout out to Downtown Comics if for some reason you're listening here. But they set me up. They said, if you love these comics, why don't you set up a pull list? And I said, well, I love the Batman. And they said, well, have you read the Nightwing? And I read it, and it kind of, they tied in together because it was all about the, the Talons and all that. And I loved it. And that really started me to enjoy Dick Grayson as a character as well. As someone who I always thought as just a Robin, but now he's his own character over in Bloodhaven. I think that DC and Marvel, the big two, they are willing to bet on their true fans.
Oh,
they would
100%.
rather start fresh with new readers and then see if some of because us, me and you, and people like us will be there no matter
for
what.
sure. I was just about to say
anything.
I was about to say, no matter the amount of bitching and complaining I've done throughout the years, they still get my money. You know, it's like sometimes I'm like, why do I do this to myself? But it's like I can't help it.
I can complain about Tom King's Batman run all day, but I can tell you right now, I have 70 issues of it. So what am I talking about?
Yeah, we're a bunch of contradicting crybabies sometimes.
That's right.
So speaking about some of our favorite characters and whatnot, you proudly rock a Mobius Silver Surfer panel in tattoo form on your arm. I believe it's a panel from Parable, his 1988 Marvel comic work alongside Stan Lee. And as someone who recently got a new sense of appreciation for his work thanks to our Mobius Spotlight we did a few episodes back, what can you share about the French comic legend that is Jean-Claude Mobius, and how did he earn a spot on your arm forever?
So for people who aren't familiar with the artist that is Mobius, he is so particular in his style. When you see a piece of Mobius art, you know it. They're very, in a world of in comics, the often argument or flack that it gets is that there's a lot of house design, a lot of people kind of doing a similar, a Jim Lee type of art, both at Marvel and DC. Mobius is just so particular, and the quality. It's funny to quickly compare it to something else that I really love is right next to my Mobius tattoo is my Daft Punk tattoo, but another
Good
French
taste.
artist, for some reason I need to go to France. Apparently my entire right forearm is just French inspired, but the quality there are certain pieces of art, whether that's music or actual, a painting or, theater or acting, whatever you see, there's a quality there that is just unmatched and very particular and specific. Mobius to me always he just like stood out to me with that. And I very specifically remember looking at when I was younger. I don't know if this was a comic shop and a trade, like a trading card shop, but I remember seeing and I don't know if you remember Botter from back in the day, they had these Mobius posters of like Spider-Man up on like a perch.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of a darker photo.
He did like
you got Punisher.
Yep. He did a series of like 7 or 8 like during that time frame. Yeah.
I just remember very distinctly looking up at the Silver Surfer one. Silver Surfer one that I think may have been from. I just recently read Parable and I don't remember seeing it, but there's this poster that I've actually been looking up on eBay to maybe buy. It's kind of expensive. I don't want to say how much it is in case I do buy it and then embarrass myself for spending that much money. But
you're in the right company.
I found this poster on eBay and I want to get it because I remember being 11 and 12 years old at a card shop looking up at this poster and just being enthralled by it. And there's a really interesting story. I think Stan Lee tells it at the beginning of Parable where he met Mobius at like
a lunch.
It might have been like Emerald Comic. It was at lunch. Yes. The lunch where they're like, we want to work together, but what do we do? And I think Stan Lee, they're like, well, actually he asked Jean what he wanted to do. And he said, well, Silver Surfer's always been kind of in the back of my mind. And Stan's like, well, that's like my favorite character in the world. Let's do it. And they did Parable. And Parable to me, and the tattoo that I have here, as much as I love Mobius, and I think he might, again, I'm trying to bury the lead here, but going to a question that we have later may be a part of that answer. Mobius to me is obviously one of the all-time greatest, and I'm kind of upset that he didn't do more over at Marvel DC.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, he has a long history in the world of comics, but Parable in particular, Silver Surfer. I just said Swamp Thing is my favorite character of all time. Very close second, maybe like 1A, 1B is the Silver Surfer. And Botter, when we first got on the call here, you looked behind me and you saw this giant Alex Ross Silver Surfer that's about 8 feet tall.
And look, I know it's made out of cardboard, but that thing is shining. Listeners, you can't see it, but I mean, it is a thing of beauty. It looks life size.
Yeah, it's huge, and I love it. Silver Surfer to me represents all that is pure in the world of comics and medium. Both Silver Surfer and Swamp Thing, both are these characters who are otherworldly powerful, but they choose very rarely to unleash that full power because they believe that there are ways to, end a conflict without fight without their raw power.
They believe in the good of humanity at that too. Like, even though sometimes we may not see it ourselves, like they believe in like the beauty that is humanity and whatnot.
And they're not even human. I mean, neither one of them, Norrin especially, is not. But Alex, he's no. I mean, in the Alan Moore run, they even say that the consciousness of Alex is just that. He is no longer human. The creature that is Swamp Thing believes that he is Alex because that was somehow melded together when he was created in that swamp. To kind of tie this all back to Mobius. Sorry, we're going on tangents here, but
Chris, you are in the right place. Like I know that I led you on to believe we were just going to talk about the Unite the Seven event, but I'm here to look. I've got nothing going on tonight. I'm here to get into the comic book weeds, and I'm enjoying where you're taking us.
That's right. No, I'm saying, listen, we can nerd out for the next 2 hours if it's up to me. But again, just to kind of tie it all together and just kind of finish out this Mobius to me, and especially again, Parable is one of my all-time favorite comics. It's a very if someone said I'm wanting to get into Silver Surfer, what would you recommend? I always put Parable in their hand because I feel like it just perfectly encompasses what a hero is and who Silver Surfer and his core is. Well so said. I would say a lot of that. And this panel is, of course, it's the one where basically he's about to go up against Galactus. You know, there's no one left on Earth. I don't know where all the Marvel heroes are at during the storyline
or something.
But Silver Surfer's like, listen, I understand what I'm going up against here. I understand that I'm more than likely going to lose. I don't care. I'm doing this not because I'm not trying to earn some kind of praise. I'm not doing this because I have some kind of vendetta against Galactus. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do, and I might fail, but that's okay. You know, so yeah. Well said.
And I cannot recommend enough that folks check out Silver Surfer Parable if you haven't. It's definitely a work of wonder for sure. And you know what, Chris, you alluded to this question a few times because that's what a good podcaster can do and can sense, which leads me to, it sounds like Mobius would be on your Mount Rushmore of comic artists. Who else would be joining him in that upper echelon?
Okay. This is a really tough question. As someone who, again, has loved the medium for quite a while now, tastes change and nostalgia plays a part. And sometimes I think, oh, well, I love this artist, but why? Is it connected to, for instance, like Mobius, for instance, like I've read a lot of different Mobius stories, but it always kind of comes back to Parable. Maybe that's why I love him so much. I don't know. But I think first and foremost, the person that I need to put there is Jim Lee. And I know that's maybe not a popular opinion because he is just so celebrated. It's almost like unpopular to love Jim Lee now because he is just across the board loved by everybody.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. And I think I know where you're going to go with this too. But, those WB cartoons or those early cartoons were also my gateway into comic books. And I think it's safe to say for a lot of people our age or who are coming up around that time. And it just so happens that the X-Men cartoon, which is one of the best fucking comic book cartoons ever, was based on his art style and whatnot. He changed the game. I mean, hell, even one of my favorite video games, Marvel's Capcom 1 and 2, really, but 2 specifically, is based on his kind of artwork. Like he's had a big like. There's a reason why he is celebrated to the point of like now it's kind of corny. But I'm right there with you, Chris.
Sure. Yeah, I got to put Jim Lee on there. I got to do it. When I think of Marvel Comics. And obviously he's over at DC now, but when I think about the Marvel Comics that I grew up with, and again, we kind of talked about it earlier about the house style and how that was basically emulated off Jim Lee's art because he was so popular in the early 90s. I think Jim Lee, I think that he is maybe the reason why I initially got into comics as a kid, not necessarily reading comics, but like the characters and loving that, that genre of superheroes and whatnot. So Jim Lee is number one for sure. I got to put Jack Kirby in there. I know, again, I'm kind of going with like some, it's hard to not put the king in there. It really is. He's one of he maybe the greatest. Now that I think about it, he just there's a really cool book, The Untold Story of the Marvel Comics. Have you read that book?
Oh, I'm sorry. One of the best books I've ever read ever. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a very particular book because I feel like someone who's not into comics might pick that up and go, I'm interested about Marvel, but like, this is a lot. They go in extreme detail about creators and what happened back in the day.
And I would almost I don't know if I'd recommend it to someone that's just getting in. I'd probably let them like kind of experience and get familiar with like how comic books are run and maybe some of like those golden age of Marvel. But for a fellow comic book fan, someone that's familiar with like the different aspects of it, yeah, I agree. You could read it and you're like, there's 1,000 names being thrown at me, 1,000 dates and characters. But for folks that are on the up and up, it's like a really revealing book that makes you, for me, it just like, it took down like this, I don't know, man. It just kind of opened my eyes to how kind of shady the business can be. At the same, like
Really
it celebrated Marvel and all its glory, but it also showed you like a lot of like the nooks and crannies that maybe you didn't want to see.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. It's one of those things where if you thought Stan Lee created all these characters by himself, and if you love Stan Lee, oh my gosh, you're going to be in for a rude awakening because he comes out looking terrible in that book.
As it does. As it does.
But King Kirby, he is, man, it just, to think that all of these cool ideas came from his brain. I just think of this old man with his gray temples smoking a giant cigar, like a big old hoagie, just in his mouth, chewing on it, and just creating this giant, Galactus and Silver Surfer on his art. It's just incredible, and I would be doing my Mount Rushmore a disservice if I did not include him somewhere. So yeah, we'll say Jim Lee, Jack Kirby. I got to put Alex Ross on there too. He's the greatest cover artist of all time. There's no one like Alex Ross either. I mean, there are a lot of realistic artists in the world of comics, but Alex Ross is Alex Ross.
When you see an Alex Ross, you're looking at an Alex Ross. Like
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually had the pleasure of meeting him at New York Comic Con back in 2019. And he is, they always say don't meet your heroes. Mm-hmm. He is extremely warm and very gracious with his time. It was a kind of a private event. There's only about 100 of us there, and it was actually off the beaten path from the convention. You had to walk a couple blocks in the city to meet him. It was this cool little industrial building that you had to go up this giant like industrial elevator to get up to. And he had this panel, and it was to celebrate his Marvelocity book that he put out a couple years ago.
Book. Real good book.
Yeah. He's just great. And like I said, I would be remiss to not include him somewhere. Here are a couple people in my mind right now that I want to include for this fourth and final spot. So I've got Mobius, of course, in the back of my mind here. The only thing that might keep him out is just based on the fact that I know he did a lot of 2000 AD. Yep. He did a lot of, French inspired comics back in the day, and he's done some Marvel and Big Two stuff. And he's incredible, like we already talked about. And I have a tattoo of him on my body. So that is definitely playing into it. I want to maybe talk about Jen Bartel because she is my favorite cover artist today. And I love her as a creator. Like, she is someone that you can support not only as a creator, but as a person as well. Bernie Wrightson really pops into my mind about someone who I really love.
Jim Bartel is very talented. What's some of the work? What are some of the covers that stand out or that you'd recommend people like check out?
So for Jim Bartel, I think she started doing like Jim and the, what's it called? Jim and the Stars or
it'll come to me.
It's from IDW, yeah. If you can remember that, she started off doing that. That's where I initially saw her, and then she did
Jim and the Holograms.
America Chavez.
That's what it is.
That's right, yeah. Jim and the Holograms, yeah. She also did America Chavez, her first run in Marvel. She did her covers. She has a really beautiful one of I think it's America #4, where it's like her very first variant cover. I actually had a 9.8 at one point, and it was just beautiful. Trying to think, she actually did the interiors and the covers for a series called Bluebird over at Image Comics with Sam Humphries.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that one.
So that one was pretty good. She has a very, for people who aren't familiar with Jen Bartel, I'm looking right here to my direct right. I have a Mondo poster of the Gotham City Sirens that's actually done by Jen Bartel.
Oh, awesome.
And she has a very Lisa Frank feel to her art. Very colorful.
I've never heard it described that way, but that's good, especially the colors. Yeah, the very kind of like neon. I see where you're going with it.
It's very in your face, like she has very, like, again, very solid lines. This is like a common complaint for a lot of different artists, but I think it works for Jen because a lot of her characters look very wooden, almost like silhouette like. But I love that because it makes it feel like a painting to me, like a classical painting.
Chris, you got a really solid list, and I'm very And I'm excited that you took on that question, head on. So, honestly, once again, I'm adding this to my tally marker. We have a lot of similarities, especially I think I put Alex Ross and for sure put Jim Lee and Kirby in my Mount Rushmore for sure. So it's kind of cool to see some more similarities there. Another similarity that me and you have, personally speaking, is that we are both veterans, military veterans at that. I understand that you did some time. You did some time like you were in jail.
No, that is the correct way to put it.
Sometimes
you said
it feels
it right.
that way when you look back. But you're an Army veteran.
I did my time, man. I did my time.
Look, I did 8, and I know how you feel. You were an Army veteran, and I was curious, what did you do? Because I understand that's where you met your co-host of the Oblivion Bar podcast, Aaron Knowles, right?
Yes, absolutely. So I was in the active Army back from 2010 to 2014. I was stationed at Fort Stewart in Savannah, Georgia. And I actually, during my time there in the military, I was at Fort Lee in Richmond, Virginia. And I was also at Fort Jackson in Columbia, South Carolina. So I moved around quite a bit. And so my real job, this is going to sound really boring for a second, but I'll bring it back around to some more interesting stuff. My first job, the job I went to my A school for was 92 Fox, which is a petroleum specialist. Basically, I would house and distribute any type of lubrications or gases for any vehicles in the Army. When I got to my actual base at Fort Stewart, they said, "What's your MOS?" And I told them 92 Fox, and they said, "You're not going to fucking do that here. So don't even, just forget everything you just learned over the last 8 months. Just forget about it. We're putting you on a gun, and you're going to be on a gun team for the next 4 years." So when I got to Fort Stewart, I was put on a 50 cal, and I was a 50 cal gunner for the next 4 years.
Much more badass than applying lubrication, in your own words.
That's right. I would much rather be on a 50 cal than in a hut, handing out MoGas. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting time there at Fort Stewart. Fort Stewart, of course, is it's one of the most, it houses some of the biggest combat based military jobs. Where cavalry and infantry. It's the 3rd infantry unit in the Army, so it had both cavalry and infantry. I was in a cavalry unit. So my first couple weeks there, I was 19, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, into a brand new world right out of high school. And I meet this.
You're taking, right. As you're speaking, like you're taking me back. Like, oh my God, if only I could go back in time.
This Midwestern boy who never left hometown. I've been to Florida once, and that was the only time I really left Indiana. My first 18 years of my life. And I'm moving all over the place, and I'm in Georgia, and I don't know anyone, and I'm 19, and I'm in formation one day, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm gonna do with my weekend on a Friday. And this gentleman comes up to me. He's a staff sergeant, so he's a couple ranks ahead of me. I'm an E3. He's an E5 or E6, excuse me. And he comes up. He goes, "Hey, you can." I get in a parade rest, and I said, "How you doing, Sergeant?" And he goes, "Hey, I saw that you were listening to Daft Punk on your lunch break. I love Daft Punk, and we bonded for a couple moments." And we're talking. He's like, "Hey, if you ever want to get together off base and maybe go get a drink or because we talked about karaoke at one point during this conversation, talked about Daft Punk, all this stuff." And I go, "Absolutely." And that was Aaron. That's my co-host, my best friend now. And then that following Monday, so we go out that weekend. We have a great time. We get drunk. We share stories. We talk about all the things we love: comics, movies, television, video games, everything. That Monday, I go up and I just walk up casually. I'm like, "Hey, what's up? What's up, Knowles?" And he literally goes, "Are you seriously talking to me right now without being parade rest?"
Oh, yeah.
I was like, we literally just spent an entire Saturday night.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my first wake up call in the Army.
Love. He gave you some tough
you're
love.
Never bigger than your rank.
For sure.
That's right. He showed me what it's like to actually be in the Army. And nowadays, if you were to ask him who wears the pants in the relationship, it's definitely me. But back in the day, he put me in my place, and he's been my best friend since. So that's how I met Aaron, and that's how kind of the beginning roots of the Oblivion Bar started.
That is awesome. And you know what? It's like I've had many of experiences like that too, where it's like I literally we shared the most personal and deep stories the other day, and it's like that line of delineation is very clear when it comes to the military. So, do you feel like there's a strong comic culture in the military?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's a strong nerd culture in the military because we are often by ourselves trying to fill time. It's a lot of hurry up and wait. If you don't have a 10-pound ruck on your back and you're not humping to a range or, overseas doing something, you're generally sitting around. I mean, let's be honest about it. Like your tax dollars are being spent very well in our military, because if we're not doing something crazy, we have a lot of downtime.
For sure.
So Aaron and I a lot of our downtime would be, we'd be playing Pokemon, the trading card game. We actually played that quite a bit, very competitively there in Georgia. Before we ever had the idea of a podcast, Aaron and I were both often going to tourneys all over Georgia for Pokemon. And comics are a big deal. A lot of video games, especially. I think of of the different, different loves, it's definitely video games. Like especially like MMOs, like World of Warcraft, League of Legends.
Yep.
Yeah, like those type. Magic is huge in the military. So definitely, and I think that the only reason why they do that is because nerd culture, and Bader, I think you can agree with this, is it's escapism. It's get out of the real world. And the military, not only the Army, and not only the Air Force, but the entire military and the real world in general, if we're being honest. I don't want to sound cynical here, but it can be shitty sometimes. And the escapism of nerd culture is the biggest draw when it comes to the correlation with the military.
For sure. Look, we joked about, having downtime and being able to do things that we like, but that downtime wasn't like, you couldn't count on it. It was like, if you had it, take advantage of it. But damn it, if you weren't working, 10, 12-hour shifts easy, it's like, no, you were busting your ass. And I agree. Like, so having that escapism, like, you needed it. And I saw what happened if you didn't have that escapism, where work was the only thing you had. Like that shit like drove people crazy. And I say that respectively at that. But
absolutely.
But to your point about video games being such a big, something that a lot of people play in the military, there was literally people in my unit, in my shop at that once work was out, I wouldn't see them. Like I wouldn't know they existed or lived a regular life, and unless it was at work, because that they really leaned in on the escapism, if I'm being honest. But yeah, video games is definitely very popular. But my co-host Cesar is the one that got me to join the Air National Guard, and of course, like thanks to him, I've been introduced to a lot of great comic books. So that's kind of cool that we have that similarities where our best friend happened to be, in the military with us, and even when me and him would deploy, like, if we weren't talking comic books, we were talking about the podcast and ideas that we had when we got, when we'd get back. So it was kind of cool to like have that experience with them, and then, bring it to the podcast. I think that's why we have really good chemistry.
Well, I'm sorry. I just want to quickly make one point with that. I think the reason why we create such strong bonds with people that we're in the military with is, for one, the sense of camaraderie that goes along with that industry.
Yep.
You're often relying on each other, and you're only as strong as your weakest link. So you're often building each other up, and there's a lot of growth within that. But also, and I've been lucky enough myself to be in 3 separate industries where being in what they say the shit together brings you closer together. I played football when I was in high school.
They say misery loves company. I'm not going to say it was like absolutely miserable all the time being in the military or some of these other industries you're about to bring up, but there is something to experiencing something that is just not enjoyable as a team or with someone that you've got to count on to, like, hey, look, either we can stay in this shit for longer than we need to, or we can work together and get out of it, No,
absolutely. Yeah. And again, like football as a kid, your grueling practices, 3 days, these games, tough losses, the whole thing, that brings you closer to people who you otherwise maybe would never even talk to. So football was one. And of course, the military is definitely another one. When you're in the shit, when you're out, sweating your ass off with somebody, or if you're experiencing hard times with people, you build relationships with people that you'll never, ever lose, for as long as you live. And then today, the restaurant industry is very similar, for me at least. Like being a bartender, getting your ass kicked on a Saturday night. Obviously, you can tell my voice is gone because of it. We had a crazy night a crazy weekend. And you know what? Once we closed those doors, after everybody left, we had a couple drinks, kind of reflected on the evening, talked about some of the crazy events throughout the night, and it's fun. Honestly, it's an experience.
Yeah. In hindsight, it's definitely fun. It's super fun.
Once you get through the shit, once you're out of it, it's fun to talk about it, right?
But we are not laughing about it, during it, in the middle of it, it's like, do not smile at me right now.
That's right. So yeah, no, it's definitely one of those things. And maybe that's the reason why I've always kind of leaned into nerd culture as well, because there also is a lot of camaraderie that goes along with that. I mean, obviously, look at us right now. Botter, you and I may have never met had it not been for the world of nerdy podcasts.
Which brings us to a good transition to actually talking about the Oblivion Bar podcast. You know, the show that you and Aaron started last year in the middle of the pandemic. And the way I understand it, you both had, you know, of course, that existing friendship thanks to your time served in the military. But how has the podcast enhanced or impacted your friendship or life in general so far?
I am really, really proud of what Aaron and I have been able to do in only a year of podcasting with the Oblivion Bar. And we talked about this briefly before the show, Botter, that if you go back and listen to that first episode of the Oblivion Bar, it is pretty tough. And then it's very tough, actually. It's really bad. Like Aaron's not even listening to me and our audio is terrible. I didn't have a mic yet. Like we were trying to stream at the same time before we even had like transcripts or quality mics. We were trying to like stream at the same time and answer questions on the show. It was definitely a work in progress. So we finally started to find our footing, and the Oblivion Bar up to this point has been such a rewarding experience because Aaron, and I won't even speak on Aaron quite yet, because for me personally, I've always kind of searched for that creative outlet. You know, I've tried to create like YouTube channels. I've tried to write blogs. I've tried to, you know, I also like to write as well. I'm an English major. So a lot of that comes from, again, loving the world of comics, and not only the world of comics, but just literature in general. So I've always kind of looked for that creative outlet, and I feel like it's just a constant failure after failure, I'm not looking for an audience. I'm not trying to get, you know, famous off of this, but I want something that's fulfilling, something that there's engagement there. Not necessarily like, I'm not trying to like become verified on Twitter necessarily, but I want a little bounce back. I want a little something, people that I can bounce off of when it comes to things that I love and that they love as well. So Aaron, I feel like feels the same way. He's a Twitch streamer and he also loves the world of comics, movies, television, video games. So during the beginning stages of COVID last year, you know, we were all kind of stuck at home, and Aaron and I, our friendship up to that point, after I had gotten out of the military and moved away, and he's still currently in the military, he and I would often say, "Oh my gosh, did you see that new Iron Man 3 trailer?" Or, "Oh my gosh, did you see that, you know, they're creating a Dark Knight trilogy or whatever with Chris Nolan?" Or, you know, just throughout the time, we would often talk about these things. And when COVID happened, I went to him, I said, "Hey, if there's a time to create some kind of outlet, whether that's a YouTube channel, a podcast, whatever, right now is the time."
Damn right.
So we came up with the Oblivion Bar. Initially, the Oblivion Bar was just going to be me. I still have the first logo of the Oblivion Bar with just me in it, the circle. And when I came to him, and he was like initially totally about it, and then like it was rough in the beginning because the first couple episodes we couldn't get on the same page about what we wanted to do, about how we wanted to structure the show. The Oblivion Bar used to be called the Oblivion Bar, a pop culture podcast, but I always wanted to be a nerd culture podcast because we rarely talk about pop culture as a whole. It's more so, again, movies, television, video games, comic books, which to me is more nerd culture based. And it was tough in the beginning. Those first 10 episodes are a little rough, but I think around like episode 11 or 12, we finally started to reach the quality and the type of agreement on what we wanted the show to be there forward. And since then, we have we just surpassed 10,000 downloads, which if you're not familiar with the podcasting world,
it's big
kind of a feat.
Yep, that is a hell of a milestone for anyone not familiar with, like, you know, podcasting stats and go. I mean, it takes a lot of work to hit 1,000 downloads in your podcast lifetime, but 10,000 at 152 episodes.
We're at 52 this week. Yeah.
I mean, congratulations. That's a hell of a milestone.
It is really, it's touching to be in the situation where Aaron and I, when we created the Oblivion Bar, we thought we were just going to be shouting into the void, you know, just talking about the things that we loved. And we never created the Oblivion Bar to, again, gain notoriety or get paid. We did it to create a community. And I feel like we're getting that. And we'll kind of talk on that community here in just a bit with the Unite the Seven, because we have got that community. We've also got the Oblivion Bar community. There's just a lot of places to bounce off the things that we love with other people that also love those things. And that's what we wanted. And it's kind of like that, you know, you could never reach the destination. It's more about the journey. You know, we'll just keep building that community and keep building it until we're done with the Oblivion Bar. But if it's up to me, I'll do the Oblivion Bar for the rest of my life.
That's how I feel about the short box. It's We're going to be hit 9 years in December.
That's incredible.
And I think that's the appeal of podcasting is that you can put in a lot of work to get your show sounding like NPR level, quality. Or you can find a good middle ground where the audio is good, the content is good, and you kind of figure out a good work stream. And I think it's one of these hobbies where you can do it for a long time. It's not like a sport where your body's gonna hit its limit or whatnot. Like this really requires is time and that passion.
Aaron would totally agree with this. I'm sure you'll listen to this episode at some point. And Bader, I know you probably are in the same boat as me, but the Oblivion Bar is almost, I would say it's like 80% my baby. I have a lot of creative control with this. Like Aaron just kind of shows up, talks about the things, adds a little flair to the conversation, and then goes home. I edit it. I create the transcripts. I do I do every social media. If you follow us,
I know well.
If you follow us on the Oblivion Bar, it is me. It is Chris the entire time. That being said, it is our show, 50-50. Aaron and I, it is 100% both of our shows.
I feel you on that one where it's like, how much it means to you, but also in the same regard, like, that it wouldn't be what it is without your best friend on it,
No, absolutely. I don't know if I would want to continue the Oblivion Bar had Aaron ever wanted to stop doing it. And Aaron, he allows me to have this much creative control because he knows that if I didn't have 100% creative control, I would lose my mind. Like the couple times where we've had to like kind of split, creative duty or figure out something where I'm like, Aaron, why don't you decide this? I'm like, actually, no, let me do this.
The same way. The podcast has put a spotlight on my a need for, I don't know if it's OCD or just my need for control, but I'm the same way.
It's a vanity project.
Yeah, where I'm like, to go and give my co-host like that leeway is like, I want to give it to you guys, but I know that I need it done a certain way. No disrespect to you guys. I need you guys to do what you do best and just let me kind of like be very anal about this. Please, please, please,
That's right. That's right. Oh, yeah, I'm the same way. Like I'm very particular in a lot of creative decisions, and Aaron, for, to his credit, he just lets me do my thing, and he just kind of shows up. He's always prepared. He provides something different. The thing that I love about the Oblivion Bar, and I know you can probably agree with this as well. I'm creating a show that I want to listen to. I like when I go back and listen to each edited episode, I think, man, if I wasn't a part of the show, I would already be subscribed. I love the quality that we're at right now. I love the material that we're putting out.
So what are some of the other podcasts or maybe like shows, whether it be YouTube or television, whatever it is, that inspired you early on, that like kind of you looked at as your kind of like guiding star when it came to making the show?
Oh man. So in the first, couple months leading up to the Oblivion Bar there back in April of 2020, I've always been a huge fan. And I think when you look, you're all going to hear me say this, and you're going to look at our logo and look at the way we do things and go, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. The Weekly Planet is probably my biggest inspiration behind the Oblivion Bar. Both Nick Mason and Mr. Sunday Movies, they have been such a huge inspiration for me.
Me and my girl watch just about every one of their videos. Yeah, they've got amazing chemistry.
So yeah, I've been watching the Weekly Planet and listening to their podcast. Obviously Mr. Sunday Movies has his YouTube channel that is very popular, but the podcast itself, the Weekly Planet, is really what got me into actually listening to podcasts in general. Like I think that might have been the very first, and for a while, my only podcast that I listened to. So that is definitely one. I would say there's a big inspiration behind, and this is probably going to make some people laugh, but the Fantasy Footballers. I'm a huge fantasy football player, and a lot of our, kind of metal riffs. Shout out to Southbound Beretta for creating all of our intros and, transitions throughout for the Oblivion Bar. A lot of those are very inspired by the Fantasy Footballers. I love their show. I would say between them and the Weekly Planet are the two that I listen to every time their show drops, I listen to it, So that's definitely two. And then I want to give a shout out, and this might be a hot take or maybe it's an unpopular opinion, but I also really love Chris Stuckman, the movie reviewer over on YouTube. He is another one that I've been watching for a very long time, and he's starting to kind of transition away from the normal movie reviews. I'm a big movie review, watcher anyway. I like to always hear people's thoughts on film and get a different perspective from what I kind of gather from watching film. So Chris Stuckman is definitely an inspiration.
2020 was also the year that I decided to be a little more proactive on like Twitter and like actually like, decide to like follow and meet and really start engaging like other comic book podcasts. And a lot of the ones that you just named, Comic Book Couples Counseling, F and Nerds, Comic Book Keepers, obviously Oblivion Bar, and honestly everyone in the Unite the Seven were some of the first ones that, like, I guess either I started following consciously or my algorithms were like, hey, you should check out this one. So 2020 was an interesting year for me in the sense of like community and collaboration. It was my attempt at like trying to figure out who else is in this particular podcast space when it comes to comic books. And I was introduced to so many great podcasts, Present Company included as well. And it was cool to like, I guess it was like what I needed to do, because I think I had spent so much time like kind of with tunnel vision and just focused on my show and trying to grow it. I think I needed to kind of see what other people were doing with their shows and the angles and being inspired and whatnot. When thinking about podcasting, what are some of what's your favorite aspect of it, and then what's your least favorite aspect, or maybe something that you wish more listeners knew about the behind the scenes kind of like process?
So when it comes to the world of podcasting, I think when it comes to Aaron and I think my favorite part is the fact that the rapport with Aaron and I is a rare thing. Like to find a friend who loves the same things that you do, is willing to go out and talk about it once or twice a week in a recorded area, have the confidence to do that, because it's not, a lot of people don't have the confidence to get behind a mic and talk like you and I are doing right now. And to have a quality and an entertainment value, at least I hope so, that people actually want to listen to it is incredible. So I think the fact that Aaron and I have found an outlet where we both have a community and an audience and a drive to there's no, like we talked about a minute ago, where like there's no real end to the Oblivion Bar, because each week there's something new to talk about. So we will always have something new to talk about. And that's the fun thing about nerd culture in general. So that being said, and kind of building off that, is that my other favorite thing about the podcasting world, and we kind of touched on it just a moment ago, is the community aspect. We're all willing to support each other. We all are genuinely fans of each other's shows because we're often talking about very similar things, but the opinions are different, and the quality and the spin on certain topics and our shows are all very specific. None of us, of all the shows that I just mentioned, none of us are the same.
No,
at all. Like there's like very little similarity to any of them, really. But we're all talking about the same thing, enjoying the same things, but we're all doing it in our own special way. And I think that's really interesting and really fun.
Yeah, and I will say, like, the podcast that you have assembled for the Unite the Seven event, I think showcase some of the best formats and ways to go about doing a comic book podcast, which leads me to the question and the topic that I think a lot of folks listening want to know about. Where did the idea of Unite the Seven come from, and can you go ahead and kind of introduce the concept?
The Unite the Seven, a nerdy podcasting event, kind of started as an idea when I was going through. Again, I'm kind of I watch a lot of YouTube, and I know a lot of creators over there often collaborate with other artists or other creators on the YouTube channel. And they'll often tag team to create like a larger event, so they'll say, if you want to watch, if you want to see every episode in this event, go to this channel, go to this channel, go to this channel, and they'll each offer something different. And I thought, I have never, in all the years that I've been listening to podcasts, I've never seen anyone do that in the podcasting world. So we already have a large community of like-minded comic book podcasts over on Twitter specifically, but across all social media. And I thought, what is something that could bring together 7 nerdy podcasts? Well, again, 7, I wanted to be a little selfish and go, what are some of my favorite nerdy podcasts? So I had to include the Oblivion Bar, of course, but who are some of the other ones? So I thought Comic Book Keepers, they're Comic Book Keepers, First Issue Club. There are 2 that I've already collaborated with. I love their shows. Comic Book Couples Counseling, they're one of the most successful in our genre. They are already established and really well off, as are you over at the Short Box. So I had to include you guys. The Wednesday Pull List offer kind of like I want to say almost like a counterculture, like kind of indie. They go against the grain. They're not following any format to find success. They're finding success because of their quality. So I wanted to include them as well. And then also you have the F and Nerds, who are also, in my opinion, I've said this before, especially during the promo for the Unite the Seven with Lance over at the Comic Book Keepers. The F and Nerds, when they're at their best, they are maybe my favorite movie-centric podcasts out right now. So uniting these 6, including us, the Oblivion Bar, made sense. And then I thought, well, what's something that we can all cover together for one central idea? And Marvel is getting enough love as is because their films are very successful. And I feel like DC is kind of waning in a little bit. Do you feel that at all? Do you feel like the DC fandom on Twitter is strong, but I feel like there are a lot of like Snyder Bros and
yeah,
like
the representation on. I think if you're going just strictly off Twitter, leaves much to be desired. Not only much to be, I think, desired from the actual fan base and audience at times, but I also I think just topical wise, Marvel just seems to be dominating a lot of that conversation on Twitter for better reasons, like more positive. You see more people sharing positive reactions and stories and anecdotes when it comes to Marvel. I think sometimes DC, in comparison, there's much to be desired.
Yeah, I completely agree. A lot of the fandom over at DC is almost kind of negative based. Like the people who are super fans of DC almost are super fans because they want to be like a contrarian against the big mouse, the House of Mouse.
Yeah,
and they Marvel's so like color corrected and Disneyfied and the whole thing. Like they want to be, they like the darker stuff. We could talk about that in a completely different light. But the whole reason why I chose the Justice League is because I felt like each character in the Justice League, which don't tell anyone that we didn't include Wonder Woman in this. So we talked about this the other day in our Unite the Seven, our group chat, that Wonder Woman was. I gave everyone an option. I said, hey, whoever you guys want to cover in the Justice League, you're more than welcome. And it just so happened that no one picked Wonder Woman. I'm like, oh, that's not good. But maybe we'll get to her eventually at some point. There are a lot of great characters being covered in this. So, but yeah, no, it came to me, and I basically put everyone in one group message. I said, hey guys, I have this idea. What do you think? Is this something that anyone would be interested in? And to be honest, and maybe I'm cynical this way, but I thought these guys are busy. They've got their own shows to worry about. Most, if not all of them, are not going to want to participate. They're not going to want to do this. And it was kind of, overwhelming by the fact that every single show almost immediately was like, I'm in, like this is so much fun. This looks like a great idea. And I was very thankful for that. So the Unite the Seven Nerdy podcasting event is just something that I'm very proud of. But I said this in the promo. I don't want to take any more credit for it, really, because all I did was put the idea out to all you talented people, and then we're all doing it. So each episode that you listen to going forward, obviously we have the Flash episode with the Comic Book Keepers that came out a couple weeks ago.
Fantastic.
We have the Aqua. Oh yeah, it was great. Really, I mean, if I can just quickly say, the Comic Book Keepers and their format of their show, where they kind of analyze a character in extreme depth, is kind of the template for the Unite the Seven event.
Yeah, they were already doing it. I was like, okay, so that's an easy lob ball for them.
That's right. And then it's a normal episode.
Exactly. And then of course, First Issue Club just put out their Aquaman episode, which lived up to the credit that you just gave them, where I liked how they introduced the show, where they were like, look, some of us have never read or fucked with Aquaman at all. We're not going to pretend to be like giant fanboys. We're even going to crack jokes on him, but it falls in line with the event very well.
The First Issue Club is one of the most funny, interesting, thought-provoking, comic book centric, first issue centric podcast out there. Like I'm a big fan of the show. I'm a good friends with Greg Lichtai, who is kind of like the Botter or the Chris over there at First Issue Club. He kind of handles a lot of their social media and all that good stuff. They're very honest in their approach when it comes to the analysis and all that. So I knew when they picked Aquaman that it was going to be a funny, kind of like almost poking fun at the event or the character.
Yeah.
And I loved it. It was very on brand.
And I want to go and say for any listeners out there, I will link to each one of these podcasts in the show notes. So you don't got to worry about trying to run and grab a pen or write it down. I got you covered. And to Chris's point, we've got 2 of 7 episodes so far. Actually, at this time, the same day that this episode airs, part 3 of 7 of the Unite the Seven event will have aired, and that is a courtesy of Chris and Aaron of the Oblivion Bar podcast. You guys are covering Superman at that, which I'm looking forward to. You've been sharing some of like the behind the scenes editing, and I know, and when you sent that one screenshot where it's like a bunch of cuts, and your editing dashboard, I was like, oh, he's in the weeds. I know exactly where he's at right now. But give us a taste. Like, how did the episode? How did it feel recording that episode? How did it feel talking? Spending, it looked like 2+ hours talking about Superman. I mean, how did you approach tackling such an iconic and a giant, massive character when it comes to comic books?
It is no small feat, that's for sure. And Aaron and I kind of approached the idea of this event kind of already wanting Superman. We talk about a lot in the episode, and I don't want to spoil too much, but I will say that the reason why I wanted Superman is because I feel like there's this idea that Superman is boring. He's hard to like. He's easy to write. He's a boring character, and I completely disagree. In every era of Superman, there's something interesting to take away from him. He's been a kind of like an Uber cop at one point in the 70s. He was kind of like this all-knowing, all-powerful being in the 60s. He's kind of like a self-reflective, I would say almost like counterculture type of character in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And then from the 90s on, he's kind of been this like beacon of old-fashioned hokey hope, and I love that about him. I think he's just a pillar of good, and he's consistent. So when Aaron and I started doing the transcript for the show, or for the Unite the Seven show, I thought, how do we cover a character that's maybe the greatest superhero of all time, and he's been around for almost 90 years?
The same question I had when you when you and Aaron when you guys picked Superman, as well as when I had the same question for Wednesday Poll when they picked Batman. I was like, you guys have your work cut out for you.
That's right. It's not easy, and we have to cover them. And I think if someone had picked Wonder Woman, they would have had the same problem, because she's been
For
around
sure.
almost as long and had just the same amount of history. But it was a lot of fun. I really loved it. Superman, to me, and this might be funny for some people, but I get kind of emotional thinking about Superman when I hear that John Williams score, and I think about the big blue Boy Scout, the kid from Kansas doing the right thing just because this immigrant from a distant planet comes to Earth and becomes the most decent human on the planet. Like, come on, that's just it's a beautiful story. I actually just watched Man of Steel today, and I talk about my thoughts on Zack Snyder in very long-winded detail during the episode. So tune in for that conversation. But I just love the character.
Well, let me ask: is there any the reasons why you like Superman? Is there any similarities or maybe like crossover appeal for the same reasons that you enjoy like Silver Surfer or Swamp Thing? Because it kind of sounds like that is some of the appeal, where it's like you've got this character that isn't human, that sees the beauty in humanity and enjoys being, like, wants to be nothing more than human, but has got to fight evil and uphold the American way and whatnot.
Absolutely. I think that I say it during the episode. These characters like Norrin Radd or Alec Holland or Clark Kent, these guys, they were not born this way. They weren't born with this inherent good.
Well said.
Through the powers of losing your life and becoming this giant sea creature, Swamp Thing, he decided that humanity was better than that. And then Norrin, after basically saving his planet by becoming the Herald of Galactus, and realized surfing the spaceways, trying to help planets that he was a couple years ago searching to be destroyed. He finds that betterment in humanity. I know that there's a section in Fantastic Four number 48 where he is basically comes to Earth for scouting it for Galactus's eventual eating or whatever you want to call it, and he's helped by Alicia Masters.
Yep.
And it's through Alicia and her kindness that he realizes that humans are better, and I think that impact sticks with him. And then Superman, of course, this baby who's brought to Earth via a pod from his parents from a dying planet and raised by these two farmers who can't have children. It's just, there's something about the idea of these characters they're not born this inherently good. They are made through experiences throughout their life. And I just love that. I love that about a character. A lot of times, if you want me to be behind a character, an inherent good always gets me. I feel personally in my heart of hearts, that a hero, not necessarily a superhero, but a hero in life is someone who just does the right thing because it's the right thing. Not because they want, fame or fortune or whatever. They do it because they believe that if they don't, no one else will. So that's why I love those characters.
Damn. Very well said. And I won't let you spoil any more of these awesome sound bites that you're giving me from your episode. I'll just let our listeners know, go over to the Oblivion Bar podcast and check out the episode they dropped same day as this one, part 3 of the Unite the Seven podcast event. They're covering Superman. So if you're a fan of Superman, that is the episode for you. But Chris, I wanted to ask about maybe some of your favorite Superman comics. What are some Superman stories that come to mind when you think, showcasing the best attributes of the character?
So it's funny you say that, because we actually had a section here on our show that we kind of talked about each one.
Oh, okay.
And a couple other ones that I want to kind of highlight was For the Man Who Has Everything, which is the famous Superman annual number 11 from 1985, written by Alan Moore, illustrated by Dave Gibbons. This is the same creative team behind Watchmen, who some people may know. And I'll kind of give you a synopsis here and then kind of talk about it. So the story revolves around the Black Mercy, an extraterrestrial magical plant-like organism that, upon attaching itself parasitically to its victims, exhibits enjoyable hallucinogenic effects onto the victim's mind. So in this storyline, you have Batman, Robin, and Wonder Woman visiting Superman at the Fortress of Solitude for his birthday, which is February 29th for all you trivia nerds out there. They find him catatonic with an alien plant wrapped around his body. The alien conqueror Mongol reveals himself, explaining the plant, the Black Mercy, has incapacitated Superman while it consumes his bio-aura, feeding him a realistic dream based on his heart's deepest desire. In his catatonic state, Superman dreams of a normal life with his long-destroyed planet of Krypton, happily married to Lila LaRoe with his children. So this is Alan Moore in his truest form, where he was probably experimenting with, I would say, extracurricular activities himself. And he thought, man, what is my deepest desire? So he gave Superman this sort of like fever dream of like his perfect life. And it kind of deals with the idea of, even if you don't know it's real, your deepest desires, what would you prefer? Would you prefer this? Would you prefer like this fake fantasy, or would you prefer the reality around you? Even if that fake fantasy is obviously a fiction, would you put yourself in that situation to enjoy it and live your life that way? It's almost like an ignorance is bliss question. Mm-hmm. So, love that one. One of the better Superman stories of all time.
And the fact that it is, not only is it considered, there's a reason why you brought it up, considered one of the best Superman stories out there, but it also, I think, captures a lot of like those elements and those aspects of Superman, the character, that make him so great. And Alan Moore, effortlessly, alongside Dave Gibbons' amazing artwork, captures that in like this annual, not really, I guess maybe not random, but like annual number 11, it wasn't like some big milestone thing, it's just like, here's a annual 11. I got that.
That's right. No, I completely agree. It's amazing that it just kind of plopped in there, because I don't think Alan Moore was even writing Superman at that time. So they just gave him one issue, and he had a good story, and it shows here, obviously. So I want to give you one that was more recent. And I think that this is definitely getting a lot of love here recently. And that, of course, is Superman Smashes the Klan from 2019.
Oh, man. Jen Lewin Yang, correct?
That's right. Yeah. And illustrated by Gary Huro. So this one is loosely based off the 1946 The Adventures of Superman radio show. And it's the storyline, The Clan of the Fiery Cross. And the story follows teenagers Roberta and Tommy Lee as they just moved with their parents from Chinatown to the center of Metropolis, home of the famous superhero Superman. One night, the family is awakened to find that their house is surrounded by a clan of the Clan of Fiery Cross. Superman leaps into action, but his exposure to this mysterious green rock has left him weak. So can Roberta and Tommy help Superman smash the Klan? So when I read Superman Smashes the Klan, it just feels kind of warm and round on the end. Like I feel like I'm like reading a weighted blanket. It has this certain amount of just wonder about it. And there's nothing like Superman just attacking a bunch of Nazis. It just something American about it. I love it. I love everything about it. It's a YA book, so you can read it to your kids. There's a lesson in there for everybody, and I just think that it's one of the more wholesome Superman stories in recent memory.
For sure, it's a testament to, it doesn't matter about the format or who the intended audience is age wise. It's really kind of drilling down to like, that the core of the character. And if you really have a good understanding of it, much like I think Gene Lewin Yang had, you can write a really good story regardless of who it's intended for.
No, absolutely. I completely agree. I read it only because of the word of mouth that people were saying how much they loved it. So
for me, when I think, greatest all-time Superman stories, or Superman stories I'd recommend to people to check out. Among my list of recommendations, Superman Secret Identity by Kurt Busiek and Stuart Immonen. I love the Alan Moore and Kurt Swan stuff with Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. Of course, Superman Red Sun, if you want like a really cool alternate take where, he's not, defending the American way and he's, born in Russia. Highly recommend that by Mark Millar. But and then of course, All-Star Superman goes without saying. Absolutely.
I'll give you one more here, and I think this is not like a hot take for Superman or for comics in general, but Kingdom Come needs to be talked about for sure. God. From 1996.
I don't know how. That's a good one. Yeah, that's like right in front of our face. Yeah. Because it's like
Kingdom Come, of course.
It's like it's two of my favorite comic creators ever, Mark Waid and Alex Ross.
That's right. Damn. Yeah, I mean, anytime you can get Alex Ross on interiors,
for
you
sure.
got to do it. And it's going to be an instant classic as well. That's for sure.
That is well.
So this one, I don't think I need to explain in great detail about what Kingdom Come is, because I think people are pretty aware of it now. But it is an Elseworld story that basically it's a deconstructionist tale about the superhero genre and how the old heroes have kind of been phased out, and these new heroes are kind of irresponsibly being dangerous, and like they're almost like villains. Like they show themselves as heroes, but they're actually like kind of erratic, and they don't care about the people they're saving. They're more doing it for like the fame of it all and all that good stuff. So while this is like a expansing DC universe book, it's more centered around, I'd say, around Superman more than anyone else.
For sure. I think the argument is safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And he at some point, he eventually, not to spoil too much, but he reassembles a lot of the old heroes to fight some of the newer ones. And it's just a great story. I love it so much. For
sure. Listeners, if your Superman knowledge or library is looking a little thin, I definitely recommend hopping on any one of these titles that we've discussed. Well, look, I am glad that you took the initiative to get us all together to share this idea and whatnot. I think it's a rad idea. It's one that I have never been a part of. I've done like live shows with other podcasts, but never to this extent where it's like, you provided the schedule. We've got, rough outline to kind of work from. But for the most part, it's like, hey, be the podcast that you are and showcase why people love you so much. So thank you so much for inviting us and getting that kick started.
Absolutely, yeah.
We're getting to a pretty good stopping point, but first I wanted to say, I know that the Bolivian Bar podcast covers much more than comics. You guys cover topics related to the larger nerd culture universe altogether, like film, TV, video games, etc. And that's something that, here on the Shortbox, we've always been adamant about putting a spotlight on ourselves. I mean, hell, we dedicate a whole segment every episode to spotlighting our favorite things from those mediums. So I thought I want to extend a special invitation to you, Chris, and ask if you'd like to join me in wrapping up this episode with sharing your champion pick. Would you like to join me for champion season?
I would love to. Absolutely.
Hell yeah. Well, let's go ahead and cue up the intro, and then we're going to go ahead and pick some champions this week.
Champion Season.
Champion Season, it's the part of the show where we highlight other worthwhile entertainment and provide recommendations for new movies and TV series. We'll be talking about books, video games, and anything else that we feel is worthy of your time. The segment is brought to you by Black Hive Tattoo, Jacksonville's premier appointment-only custom tattoo studio. If you're searching for a group of talented artists who will work with you to bring your comic culture ideas to life, then look no further. Go to blackhive-tattoo.com and sign up for their newsletter to find out when they're taking new project requests. Chris, as my guest of honor today, I'm going to go ahead and let you kick it off first. What are you going to champion today?
Alrighty, so I want to champion a book that I've been kind of diving into a lot here recently, and that is Writing Comics and Graphic Novels with Peter David. And this is, another in the long line of how-tos when getting into the world of comics. It's on Amazon. It's on all the major, book buying platforms. I would compare it for people who are kind of interested in this world, kind of behind the scenes, how to break into the world of comics. It's very similar to like Words for Pictures, written by Brian Michael Bendis. You've got the Alan Moore's Writing for Comics, Volume 1, that I also picked up here recently. The Scott McCloud books, I think it's called Understanding Comics. He's got a couple of them actually that he's really that are really amazing. One of my favorites is the DC Guide to Writing Comics, which was written by the late Dennis O'Neil, RIP, to one of the greatest writers of all time. And but this one here, writing for comics and graphic novels with Peter David, I will be completely honest here in this Champions segment that I've never really read a ton of Peter David. I mean, he was really big in the early 80s to the mid 90s with his runs on the Hulk and with Young Justice and many others. He's also a novelist as well. So when I heard people talking about this how-to, basically like the, how he got his start in the world of comics and medium, I was like, well, I need to check this out. And I'm absolutely enjoying it. It's a great, it's almost like you're like getting inside his brain to show how he does the things that he does. And I'm a big, I like to see how the hot dogs are made, if you will. So I like these kind of stories where it tells you how these accomplished creators found their way. And maybe it offers you a little something to, if you ever have interest in getting into the world of comics. I know I definitely am at some point. I have a serious imposter syndrome when it comes to my writing. So, but maybe one day I'll have the courage to put it out there. And I think books like this offer invaluable information and advice into breaking that industry. So once again, my champion pick is Writing for Comics and Graphic Novels with Peter David.
Good stuff. And I'm glad you, because I was going to mention the Words for Pictures, the art and business of writing comics and graphic novels by Brian Michael Bendis. That's another good one too, but you've already got that one on lock. But I'll check out that Dennis O'Neil one. I haven't heard about that one.
Really good. That's actually, I would say, after reading a couple of these, I would say the Understanding Comics is probably a definitive number one. Then it's the DC Guide to Writing Comics is my number two, and then Words for Pictures is my number three for sure. Awesome.
And I'll go ahead and share my champion as well. It is a documentary that I just watched. And I know that recent champions have been a lot of Apple Plus stuff, but I'm telling you, this is the last one for me. All right. It's the Beastie Boys story that is on Apple Plus. It's a live documentary film that released last year, 2020. It's directed, produced, and written by the world-renowned filmmaker, actor, photographer, et cetera, Spike Jonze, alongside 2/3 of the Beastie Boys, Mike D and Ad Rock. Of course, Adam Yauch, MCA, passed away in 2012. But the documentary was filmed at King's Theater in Brooklyn, New York, and it's essentially just adapting their memoir that they released a few years ago, the Beastie Boys book. It is a documentary, but at the same time, it's also a live performance. So you've got Mike D and Ad Rock on this theater stage telling the story from their own mouths, like of the Beastie Boys. And they've got like a sound engineer guy that's, comically at times, like throwing in drops and they're showing things on the big screen and, showing clips from back in the day, whether it be on tour or interviews or music videos. But it's really them telling their own story and they're doing it in a very, you could tell like there is some level of production and rehearsal that went on because, they've got certain cues and whatnot that drop. But it's so... It is so endearing and honest and inspiring, as someone, and Chris, you include as well, as someone that kind of works in this creative field and uses podcasting as an outlet. I recommend it to any creatives, podcaster or not. If you're a creative person, you got to watch it because what you get out of it is a sense of not only, I guess for me, a newfound respect for Beastie Boys. I think a lot of us have a certain image of who the Beastie Boys are, but you end up really appreciating their musicality and their artistry as well. Like these guys are real artists that went through the industry, got even spit out at some point and found themselves and reinvented themselves a lot of times. And I think, the thing that kept them going was their friendship and their sense of adventure and curiosity and wanting to kind of tap into that inner child that we all have. It's an amazing doc. It's about a little over 2 hours, but it's shot very well. And I'll say this, as someone who has done a few live podcasts, it's inspiring in a lot of ways as far as like how to go forward with this thing. So I definitely recommend the Beastie Boys story on Apple Plus. Chris, this has been a fantastic and a much longer conversation than I thought originally, but it's only because I really enjoyed chatting with you and getting to meet you and whatnot. I want to close this out like I normally do with any of my interviews and ask you, what's a piece of advice that you'd give to aspiring or rising podcasters looking to share their voice with the world? Is there something specifically that you wish someone would have told you as you were trying to get your show started?
So I would say, and again, we're still in the grand scheme of podcasting in general, we're still a relatively new show. But that being said, we've learned a lot over this last year and a half. I would say my biggest piece of advice when it comes to podcasting or just being creative in general is, and this is going to sound cliche, but I think it's invaluable. Never stop learning. Always take advice from people who have been there before. Always do research, always be prepared. And don't be afraid to take chances. The Unite the Seven is a great example of that. I feel the podcast, the Oblivion Bar in general, I think is a great example of that, of something that, you always have people who are afraid to put things out there and they're afraid to be eager and they're afraid to be creative. And I just think that it's a sad moment when something like that happens. So when it comes to creating podcasts, if I'm being specific here, like I said, always just watch as many tutorials as you can. Always try to improve your show. Never settle for whatever your show is at that moment. Try to do something better. Always find something new to make better with each new episode. And again, if you want a great example of that, and I'm not saying that we have a perfect show, but I would recommend maybe go listening to that first episode of the Oblivion Bar when we were using, copyright-free intros and no mics. And you can definitely tell that Aaron's barely listening to me in the conversation because he's trying to work on the Twitch at the same time. And then go to our most recent episode, which at this time will be the Unite the Seven Superman episode, and just listen to the difference. Because if I can quickly say, that Superman episode that's releasing on Wednesday is our most intricate, and it took me a very long time to post. You alluded to earlier, I showed some pictures of my Adobe Audition after the fact, after I'd cut everything, and it's just a mess. It just looks crazy. And it's because I really care about this episode, and I care about the podcast. So never stop learning when it comes to the podcasting world. Always try to improve different aspects of it, and don't be afraid to be creative.
Very well said. Thank you for sharing that. Chris, like I said, this was a great conversation. If you ever want to come back on, reach out, let me know. But to wrap us up by letting our listeners know where they can hear more Oblivion Bar podcasts, where they can hear you, and et cetera. Go ahead and plug all of that in.
So we are on all of the major streaming services: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music. We're on iHeartRadio. We're trying to get on Pandora. I don't know if you guys have had issues trying to get on Pandora.
It took months.
Yeah. I keep getting the runaround with these guys, but one day we'll get on Pandora. We're on all the major social medias: TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're at the Oblivion Bar on Twitter and Facebook and TikTok. On Instagram, we are at the Oblivion Bar. Rate, subscribe, and review on Apple Podcasts. That's the only. If you want to help the show, the best ways are to subscribe, rate, and review, and of course, if you feel so inclined, Patreon. So, and I want to thank Badr. Thank you so much for having me on today. Thank you for kind of picking my podcasting brain for a bit, and I will echo exactly what you said. It was a great time meeting and talking for the first time. I feel like we could keep this going for another couple hours if we wanted to.
Oh, easy.
If my voice could keep up, I would, and if I could grab an Alani or something, I would be here for the entire evening.
Well, but we'll just plan for a part 2 then. That's what we'll do.
That's right.
Hell yeah.
That's right. I'm going to have you on over at the Oblivion Bar at some point.
I would absolutely love it. So listeners, look, I know we gave a lot of different names of shows and whatnot, but once again, the show notes will be your best friend. I'll have links to all of the episodes so far for the Unite the Seven, as well as Chris and the Oblivion Bar's podcast latest episode. Check those out. Chris, I'm gonna go ahead and let you go. Let your voice heal, and hopefully you feel better. And I'm looking forward to the episode. I know I'll be tuning in this Wednesday. Once again, thank you so much, man.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, there you have it, Shortbox Nation. Let's give it up one more time for Chris Hacker, and do yourselves a favor and go subscribe to the Oblivion Bar podcast on your favorite podcast app right now. No waiting. Come on, right now. Go search the Oblivion Bar podcast and hit that subscribe button. Make sure to check out their Superman episode as well as the rest of the shows involved in the Unite the Seven event. We'll be dropping our contribution, a character spotlight on the Green Lantern, John Stewart, Wednesday, October 6th. Of course, the conversation doesn't have to stop here. Tell us what you thought about this episode or champion something for us to check out. Feel free to reach out to us on social media or write us a short email and send it to our inbox at theshortboxjacks@gmail.com to have it read next episode. And just a heads up, the Shortbox will be taking a short break next week. We'll be back with a new episode the following week, or maybe even at the end of the month. You'll have to just stay tuned to the podcast feed to find out, but for sure we're taking off next week. But if that's too long for you to wait and you just need to scratch that itch for new Shortbox content, consider joining our Patreon community for access to our bonus episodes, for access to our bonus content like our spin-off podcast series, Pilot's License. It's a show dedicated to the best comic book cartoons and animated shows. We just did an awesome episode on Justice League Unlimited and even got to talk about Jon Stewart in that one. So check out the links in the show notes for more information on that and more. I promise we'll be back. That week-long break, it'll go by in the blink of an eye. And you know what? Use it to catch up on our recent episodes if you're a little behind, or if you're a new fan, perfect time to get caught up on some of our recent episodes. Check out my interview with Jeremy Holt, the writer of Made in Korea, or check out our Shang-Chi Spotlight if you've recently seen the movie and you enjoyed that, or any of our other episodes. I will definitely recommend our Mobius Artist Spotlight. That one was fantastic, and of course, Chris brought it up, so why not? In the meantime, take care of yourselves, have a great week, and please continue to make mine and yours short box. Peace.